Easter 1916. Easter 1916 is a poem by W.B. Yeats. Through this poem, W.B. Yeats tries to remember the Easter Rising or Easter Revolution that took place on 24th April 1916. According to W.B. Yeats, this rising or this revolution was a futile attempt, that is, having no obvious result, in which some of his friends were participants. They had took the chance of England being engaged in Second World War, and they had raised rebellion against England's occupation of Ireland. However, they were captured and 15 of the leaders were court-martialed and were executed. Yeats' attitude towards them was complex because he was skeptical of the violent measures adopted for political change. However, this poem is very important and has wider relevance and significance in English literature. Let us go through the life of the poet W.B. Yeats. William Butler Yeats. He was born on 13th June 1865, Dublin, Ireland. He was son of John Butler Yeats, a famous painter, and Susan Pollock Fenn. He was an Irish poet and he was a Victorian poet too. And he was a pillar of Irish literary movement and chief figure of Irish Renaissance, where he was, along with Lady Gregory and J.M. Synge, one of the founding figures of Abbey Theatre in Dublin. And the three major occupations of his life and his poetry were Ireland, spiritualism and love. These three were three major preoccupations of his life. See, his life can be seen. Ireland, spiritualism and love can be seen throughout his works and his life. He had unrequited love for Madgone. Madgone was a participant in Irish rebellion, and he had an unrequited, that is not returned love. See, he was loving Madgone, but she was not ready to return the love. He was a poet who was extremely lyrical, symbolic and sensuous. His verse reflected a pessimism about the political situation in his country that we have already mentioned. According to W.B. Yeats, this Irish rebellion itself was a futile attempt. So his verse reflected a pessimism about the political situation in his country and the rest of the Europe. His poetic career falls into three periods. A romantic tradition of Spenser, Shelley and Blake can be identified in his works of The Wanderings of the Oisin, The Countess Kathleen, The Wind Among the Reed. And Irish background and Irish experience can be seen in his works in The Seven Woods, The Green Hamlet, The Wild Swans at Cooley. See, these are the works written in the second phase where Irish background and experience can be seen. Then, a private mythology and metaphysical strains are major themes of the third phase, where he had written A Vision, The Tower, the winding stairs. He had won Nobel Prize for Literature in 1923 and died on 28 January 1939. Then let us go to the poem Easter 1916. See, he is explaining what had happened to his friends, the revolutionaries. He is explaining all the activities from the mundane realities. See, the poem was written on 25th September 1916. Actually, the revolution or rising had took place on 24th April 1916, but he had written this poem on 25th September 1916 during a short stay with Madgon, who was his lover. The poem appeared in the collection Michael Robates and the Dancer in 1921. The poem consists of 4 alternating stanzas of 16 and 24 lines with a rhyme scheme AB, AB, CD, CD and the refrain, that is repeated line. See, a line that is being repeated at the end of each stanzas, which is a terrible beauty is born, again repeating at the end of first, second and last stanzas, as it is a refrain. So let us go to the poem Easter 1916. I have met them at close of day, coming with vivid faces from counter or desk among grey 18th century houses. I have passed with a nod of the head or polite meaningless words, or have lingered a while and said polite meaningless words, and thought before I had done of a mocking tale or a jibe, to please a companion around the fire at the club, being certain that they and I but lift where motley is worn, all changed, changed utterly, a terrible beauty is born. Is the first stanza. The poem opens in a casual tone about the past, and end of the first stanza wakens to a sudden change, symbolizing the arousal from the lethargy that engrossed the Irish people as a whole. I have met them. I have met these friends or rebellions or revolutionaries or Irish people itself at close of day, that is at evening. He used to meet them. They were coming with vivid faces, with clear faces, from counter or desk among grey 18th century houses. From counter, sometimes they were coming from counter of shops, as they were busily engaged in merchandise, or desk among grey 18th century houses, or houses built of granite or limestone, as it is grey 18th century houses. It was used of built of granite or limestone. See, W.B. Yeats used to meet them at close of day, these Irish rebellions or Irish revolutionaries. They were coming with vivid faces from counter of shops or houses built of grey granites. I have passed with nod of the head. See, I have passed these people with a nod of the head. He used to nod the head, or polite meaningless words. They have conveyed some polite meaningless words, or have lingered a while or stopped a while and said polite meaningless words. Sometimes they have passed, or sometimes they have stopped a while and said polite meaningless words. See, we people may have used to exchange some meaningless words while meeting our friends or our acquaintances, and thought before I had done of a mocking tale or jibe to please a companion around the fire at the club, and thought before I had done. And sometimes he think of them that before he had done of a mocking tale, they have exchanged a mocking tale, meaningless tale, or a jibe, a sarcastic comment or taunt. They have exchanged each other to please a companion, to make companionship enjoyable. They have exchanged a mocking tale or a jibe. Around the fire at the club, at the evening, they used to sit around the fire at the club and they have exchanged kind of meaningless words or mocking tale or a jibe. Jibe is what? A sarcastic comment. Being certain that they and I but lived where mortally is worn. Being certain, it is sure. These all, it is sure, being certain that they and I, these Irish people, were living. They lived where mortally is worn, where we are all fools and clowns, incapable of heroism. They could not do anything. Okay, it is where lived where mortally is worn. All changed utterly. It was യൂഷ്വൽ ഹാപ്പനിങ്. സാധാരണ പതിവായിട്ട് ഈ ആളുകൾ ഇങ്ങനെ പരസ്പരം നിരർത്ഥകമായ ചില കാര്യങ്ങളൊക്കെ സംസാരിച്ച് ചില കാര്യങ്ങളൊക്കെ അങ്ങോട്ടും ഇങ്ങോട്ടും പങ്കുവെച്ച് പിരിയാറുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. പക്ഷേ ഇതായിരുന്നു അയർലൻഡിലെ യൂഷ്വൽ ലൈഫ്. ദിസ് വാസ് ദ usual experience of the people of Ireland. But all changed utterly, changed completely. A terrible beauty is born. Terrible beauty is born. It is the first time he uses this expression in a letter written to Lady Gregory about the Dublin tragedy. I am trying to write a poem on the men executed. A terrible beauty has been born again. He had, see, W.B. Yeats had written to Lady Gregory about the Dublin tragedy, and he had written in it, I am trying to write a poem on the men executed during Irish Revolution, and a terrible beauty is born. Their act of heroism is beautiful, but it is terrible. Is a what? An oxymoron, terrible beauty. As it is beauty, but it is terrible. Okay. Then second stanza. That woman's days were spent in ignorant goodwill, her nights in argument until her voice grew shrill. What voice more sweet than hers when young and beautiful she rode to Hayes? This man had kept a school and rode our winged horse. This other, his helper and friend, was coming into his force. He might have won fame in the end. So sensitive his nature seemed, so daring and sweet his thought. This other man I had dreamed a drunken, vainglorious lot. He had done most bitter wrong to some who are near my heart. Yet I number him in the song. He too has resigned his part in the casual comedy. He too has been changed in his turn, transformed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. Here the poet memorializes the martyrs individually and portrays how the original feelings had given way to respect and admiration, evoking a terrible beauty. Not a passionate eulogy idealizing the revolutionaries, the poem illustrates them as human beings with their own imperfections. Anyway, that woman is Countess Garbuth. That woman's days were spent in ignorant goodwill. Her days were spent in ignorant goodwill. her nights in argument. She used to spend her nights in argument. These were how they were living. Countess Gorbooth. She used to engage in argument until her voice grew shrill. What voice more sweet than his? But actually her voice were more sweet, so there were no other voice more sweet than hers. When young and beautiful, she rode to Harris. When she was young and beautiful, she rode to Harris. Harris is a part of club's name. Cross country runners as a group or club. She used to ride to Harris and when young and beautiful. So what voice is more sweet than hers? This man. Then WB is going to explain the second friend, who is another revolutionary. This man had kept a school, and he is a schoolmaster who founded the St. Enda School in County Dublin. Kept a school, he had founded a school and rode our winged horse, and he rode Pegasus. Winged horse means Pegasus, the mythological horse of Muses. He was a poet too. That means he was a poet too. This other, his helper and friend, was coming into his voice. Thomas MacDonagh. This other is Thomas MacDonagh, who is also a poet, dramatist, critic and university lecturer. He helped Patrick Pearse in running the school. So he was also coming into his voice. He might have won fame in the end. He might have won fame in the end. He might have become familiar by the end. So sensitive his nature seemed. His nature seemed so sensitive and delicate, so daring and sweet his thought. His thoughts were so daring and sweet. He was dramatist, poet and critic, university lecturer and all. This other man I had dreamed. This other, who is John McBride. The fourth one, John McBride, I had dreamed, is a drunken, vainglorious lord, because who had married Mad Gone, who was his lover. He is a drunken, vainglorious lord, extremely vain. He was a drunken and extremely vain. He had done most bitter wrong. He had done most bitter wrong. What was the wrong? He had married whom? Mad Gone. Okay. To some who are near my heart. To some. He had done most bitter wrong. To some. Who is the some? Mad Gone. As he had married this Mad Gone, who are near my heart, as he had been in love with this lady Mad Gone. Yet I number him in the song, even though he had participated in Irish rebellion or Irish revolution or Irish Easter rising. I number him in the song. He too has resigned his part in the casual comedy. He too has done his role in the casual comedy, that is what? Irish Revolution. He too has been changed in his turn, transformed utterly. He too had changed and completely changed. A terrible beauty is born. Again the refrain, a terrible beauty is born. Then the stanza or the third stanza. Hearts with one purpose alone, through summer and winter seem enchanced to a stone to trouble the living stream. The horse that comes from the road, the rider, the birds that range from cloud to tumbling cloud, minute by minute they change. A shadow of cloud on the stream changes minute by minute. A horse hoof slides on the brim, and a horse splashes within it. The long-legged move hence dive, and hence to more cocks call. Minute to minute they live, the stone in the midst of all. Too long. Okay, in this stanza, the poet contrasts the revolutionaries' single-mindedness with the rhythm of movement around them. The stone image, which lies at the center of the poem, is introduced in this stanza. Two antithetical symbols, stone and stream, are brought together. So, antithesis also can be seen. Hearts with one purpose alone, though they were coming from different stratas of life, they had come with one purpose alone. One purpose alone. Through summer and winter seem enchanted to a stone. Through summer and winter seem enchanted. Enchanted means attracted to a stone. To trouble the living stream. See, they had come to trouble the living stream. It was calm stream. It was flowing like a stream. The social life in the Ireland was flowing like a stream. So they have come to trouble the living stream, and it is like a stone in the mid of a stream. That is antithesis. The horse that comes from the road. The horse that comes from the road, the rider, the birds that range from cloud to tumbling cloud, minute by minute they change. The horse, the rider, the birds change minute by minute. Okay. A shadow of the cloud on the stream changes minute by minute, and even shadow of the cloud on the stream changes minute by minute. A horse hoof slides on the brim, as he is comparing the social life into a stream. A horse hoof of horse slides on the brim, and a horse splashes within it. A horse splashes. You see, splashes means strike at the surface of water. Splashes within it means within the stream. See what change is happening in Ireland. The long-legged moor hens dive, and hence to more cocks call. Minute to minute they live. They live minute to minute. The stone is in the midst of all. See, this was the social life of Ireland. So, a stone is in the mid of this stream, and the stone in the midst of all. Too long a sacrifice can make a stone of the heart, or when may it suffice. Too long a sacrifice can make a stone of heart, or when it may suffice. That is heaven's part. Our part to murmur name upon name. That is heaven's part. That is being decided by God. Our part is to murmur, to cite the name of these participants or revolutionaries upon name. As a mother names her child when sleep at last has come on limbs that had run wild. See, here the poet is paying tributes to the participants or revolutionaries. They had done too long a sacrifice. Okay, our duty is to praise them or to pay tribute to them. Just like as a mother names her child when sleep at last has come to this child's limbs that had run wild. What is it but nightfall? See, he is comparing entire revolution into a nightfall. No, no, not night but death. Was it needless death after all? He is just bringing some rhetoric questions. Was it needless death after all? After all, was it needless what? Death of all these revolutionaries? For England may keep faith for all that is done and said. Because England may keep faith for all that is done and said. We know their dream, enough to know they dreamed and are dead. They have dreamt enough. See, these Irish revolutionaries had dreamt and they are dead. And what if excess of love bewildered them till they died? Sometimes they may have been bewildered by excess of love. I write it out in a ways. MacDonough, McBride, Connolly, and Pierce, now and in time to be, wherever green is worn, are changed. Changed utterly, a terrible beauty is born. Actually, the last part of this poem brings out his disappointment. The bill for Home Rule had received the royal assent in 1914 actually. England had promised to put the bill into force after the war. Then it was a futile attempt that had been done by these Irish revolutionaries or Easter revolutionaries. That is a short explanation of this poem. Okay, it was published in 1921 in Michael Robartes and the Dancer. Some points on this poem. Poem commemorating the Easter Rising in Dublin on Easter Monday, April 24th, 1916. Poem is divided into 4 stanzas. Here 4 represents the 4th month April, have an irregular line length and meter. There are either 16 or 24 lines in each stanza. Each stanza represents the date for April 1916. Rhyming pattern of this poem is AB AB and setting Dublin, capital of Ireland. These all have been done as some points we have already explained in the poem. Themes of this poem are patriotism versus nationalism, one. Then senseless violence. Actually, poet is thinking of the violence done by these Irish patriots are senseless. Death and mourning. Then love is another theme of this poem. Okay, he had unrequited love towards Madgon, and Madgon is being cheated by her husband. Background of this poem. Yeats commemorates the Easter Rising, an armed insurrection which began in Dublin, Ireland on Easter Monday, April 24th, 1916. Some labourers and political leaders turn against the British government in Ireland and they announces a new independent Irish Republic. This resulted in the execution of Irish nationalists. His attitude towards them was complex. He was doubtful of the violent measures adopted for political change. Tone shifts from casual indifference to confusion and sadness to ultimate acceptance and sympathy. And this poem is best known for its famous refrain, all changed, changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. It's a famous refrain. A stanza-wise explanation or short analysis or just short some points based on stanza. In the first stanza, poet recalls Dublin before rebellion, life of Dubliners, normal life they had led before Easter Rising, and encounters with clerks and shopkeepers. That is what in the first stanza. In the second stanza, poet memorializes the martyrs. Constance Mackiewicz, Patrick Pearse, a poet and founder of St. Enda's School in Dublin, Commandant General of the Provisional Government. And in the second stanza, we can see a winged horse is a reference to Pegasus, represented poets in Greek mythology. That is, he was a poet. Patrick Pearse was a poet. Thomas Macdonald is another one that is mentioned in the second stanza. He was a poet, dramatist, critic, and university lecturer. He was helper and friend to Patrick Pearse. John McBride, who was married Madgone, who was Yeats' sweetheart and later divorced her. That is what John McBride had done wrong to some who was nearer to this poet, described him as a drunken, vainglorious lout in the poem. In the third stanza, poet memorialized the rebels for their strength in sacrificing themselves. They were hard with one purpose alone, through summer and winter seem enchanted to a stone to trouble the living stream. The rebels have hardened their hearts against the British, and their hearts are compared to stone. In the stanza fourth, is Christian the significance of Easter Rising? He wonders whether such sacrifice was necessary, since England had after all promised Ireland their independence. Was it needless death after all? But speaker again put aside this criticism to honor them for their bravery. We know their dream, enough to know they dreamed and are dead. Poetic devices discussed in the poem are alliteration, casual comedy, that is one alliteration, beauty is born, no, 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 tonight. Repetition is another poetic device, changed utterly, a terrible beauty is born, polite meaningless words. These are instances of repetition. Oxymoron is there, two opposite words joined together, that is what oxymoron. An example of oxymoron is terrible beauty. Synecdoche, that is mentioning part or in full, and is being mentioned by part. In heart in the third stanza and limbs in the fourth stanza are examples of synecdoche. Symbols mentioned in the poem are winged horse. Greek mythology, it is for poet. Then metaphor are there. Imagery is also there.